working on the recovery of plants in forests that have been cut down.
Lados.
Many people consider that these plants are unimportant and do not contribute anything to our ecosystem. But they are very wrong. I'm convinced that these plants are essential to provide us with clean air and water. Let me introduce myself. I am Lisset Valeria Diego Duran, manager of Auxilia ecotourism Umari. In our project, we have managed to recover 115 species of native orchids. I started this work 6 years ago with the main objective of conserving and preserving these native species. It all started when an NGO intervened in the forest and showed us the goodness and richness that we have in our area. From then on, the initiative to conserve the orchids arose. Since in each new trail or agricultural land that is opened, the forests are cut down and the grasslands are burned. Which is where most of the orchids are found.
En el distrito. Bueno,
one of our objectives is that our young people and children can know and appreciate the beauty that we have in our district. For example, this orchid that is attached to the tree is a fidio. One way to identify an orchid is by the type of root. As you can see, these orchids were collected when they opened a trail here in the area towards Goya. The new roots are greenish in color and absorb nutrients from the environment. The bulb, on the other hand, stores water for the orchid. We can also observe the flowering stem of this orchid, which is beginning to bud. The same orchid blooms in November last year and reaches its maximum size during flowering. In the identification of orchids,
tiempo de floración, ¿no?
the type of root, the bulb, the leaves, and above all, the flowers are considered. However, it is not always possible to find the orchids in bloom when visiting the forest. Mostly, epiphytic orchids are not attached to the tree, as they do not feed on it, but use it as a host. I have been able to find out that orchids absorb nutrients from rainwater and the environment. Therefore, the roots are exposed to the open air in order to absorb these nutrients. We also have terrestrial orchids and lithophytes. Now we are going to work in the nursery, which is like a research center. I have the adult plants in different pots or containers. To take care of the environment, we are recycling paint containers. For example, this little plant in this bucket is 4 years old and is in bloom. It is a Pleurothallus that was collected from a felled forest. In the case of orchids found in the grasslands, people usually burn them in June, July, or August so that the grass can grow back for their cattle. Orchids can be propagated by seeds and cuttings. But propagation by seeds is more complicated and slower. Since the germination power of the seeds is very low, about 0.04%, of the 5,000 seeds that can be had, only 5 to 10 plants sprout at most. Therefore, it is more advisable to propagate them by cuttings or bulbs that sprout from each adult plant. In the nursery, we are using humus that we produce here and we mix it with moss from the nearby forest to provide better conditions and facilitate the adaptation of the plants. We use different pots for this purpose. So to speak, the bromeliad species are natural to the area. Usually when they are tender, they are used to feed guinea pigs. They are also used to delimit the grounds due to their thorns and their ample growth. Today we are going to work on natural bags and pots. Usually we use transparent pots for epiphytes, and as they need to be exposed to the sun to acquire nutrients. We add humus and moss to the pot, and in this case I will also place some Orchidaceae. Usually, we are transparent pots for epiphytes. As they need to be exposed to the sun to acquire nutrients. We add humus and moss to the pot, and in this case, I will also place some Tillandsias. Which are epiphytes, terrestrial and lithophytes, and adapt well to any soil. What I usually do is prune most of the adult roots so that the new seedlings can develop new roots. Then I add some humus, which helps retain moisture and keep the pot in the nursery, which has about 130% humidity from the forest. I hold the remaining root to support it, and for 2 or 3 days I don't water them to stabilize them. After watering, I stimulated the growth of new roots and new leaves.
¿No? Un poco más de humus.
Once planted, I avoid mistreating them too much, as my goal is to preserve them and prevent them from dying. Therefore, I remove the withered flowering stems. In the nursery, I take care of them more than in the forest. Especially the terrestrial ones, which are more adaptable. The most complicated thing is to keep the orchids in the forest, as they need humidity and some of them require shade. It is necessary to be very careful with them. Unlike the orchids in the nursery. The advantage of using natural or handmade pots is that they keep the humidity. You can water them every 5 days, as they absorb moisture naturally. Flowering times are usually in April, especially for Prolotilus, and they bloom when there is an abundant water, usually in March or February. The peak flowering season for Pleurothallus is from November to April, coinciding with the rainy season in the area. Another flowering season is in October and November, as in the case of Epidendrum and the most valuable ones, which bloom almost all year round. The hypogon also blooms during most of the year. The objective of the orchid house is to conserve and perhaps legally reproduce the species. In addition, the goal is to convert it into an interpretation and research center where biologists can come and study the number of species conserved and that existed in these forests. It would be beneficial to implement a rescue team to rescue the plants when farmers cut down a forest or burn a meadow. These plants were the first to arrive and gave us the opportunity to observe their flowers and learn about their way of life and survival in the world. Although we are visitors in their home, the world is our home and we must take care of it and take responsibility. At first, this project was very personal, as a hobby collection. However, over time, I realized that the forests were being cleared and new trails were being opened and houses were being built. I realized that the orchids I used to collect 6 years ago were no longer present. So I decided to turn it into a bigger project. Perhaps to earn additional income to the job I have. Bromeliads are also very important plants, and we have a great variety here. They are excellent water conservers, along with moss, which acts as a buffer in the forest. It would be good to rescue all these little plants, including the ferns. Ferns are known for their ability to purify and neutralize the soil. In acidic soils where aluminium is present, ferns help to neutralize and purify the soil, allowing other plants to adapt and grow in the environment. In addition to ferns, another important plant in the orchid garden is a Krunapa. Another important plant in the orchid garden is a Kunupa, which is propagated to conserve native forest plants. It also seeks to conserve the biodiversity of the forest, including trees such as the paco, the jalapeno, and the wax palm. The first orchid that arrived at the orchidium was an epidendrum. And from then on, we started collecting and working with different species. Each new orchid that arrived was an excitement and a curiosity. Waiting to see how it would bloom. In addition to orchids, the diversity of forms and adaptations that plants have, such as the curious ways of preserving water, the bulbs and the adaptations of epiphytes, to survive in trees can be appreciated. What people like most about orchids are their beautiful flowers and the unique ways they preserve water. One also admires the variety of shapes in the leaves, bulbs, and the adaptations they develop to survive in trees. It is truly amazing to observe how they cling to the trunk of a tree and absorb the nutrients necessary for their survival.